Hello everyone, Chris Peterson here, bringing you another game analysis from one of my games from 2012. This time we're going to jump into round 5 of the 2012 Pikes Peak Open, played August 5th in 2012. So this time I'm going to be playing as black against Anthea Carson. So Anthea is a B player. I guess she kind of hovers around B player, A player status. She's one of the strongest women in Colorado. She's actually, I believe she's in the top 100 in women in the United States, but I'm not 100% sure on that. Anyway, she usually gives me pretty tough games because, partly because I underestimate her, and partly because I don't even know what the other part is, but for the most part, it's easy to underestimate her because she plays kind of not the most interesting openings, as we'll see in this game, but I mean, she can whip up some really strong attacks, and she can really catch you off guard. So I played D4. Oh, sorry, I'm black. So D4, Knight F6, Knight F3, G6, Bishop F4, Bishop G7, E3, castles, Bishop E2, D6, H3. So this system has many names for white. It could be considered a boring system, a la Jeremy Silman via Anthea Carson is what she told me anyway. It looks a lot like a London system. It is even technically a branch of the Kali system, but I think the most apt name for it, for this particular setup, comes from Jeremy Silman, the boring system. Although I play a similar type opening as white, I don't usually play it quite like Anthea does. Typically I kind of hold off on H3, and I'll play my bishop to D3. And play against the E5 square. Although I play a completely different setup when they fianchetto on the king side. So I went knight b to D7, knight b to D2, B6. So I could just play E5 right away, and this would be okay. D takes E5, knight E5, knight E5, D E5, bishop E5. Queen E7, Bishop C3, and now like Rook D8, and I have some strong pressure for the missing E pawn. I have pressure down the center. My pieces are going to develop really quickly, and White's going to struggle for a little bit to get his pieces onto decent squares. So that wouldn't be too bad, but I am down a pawn, so I have to make something happen. So instead I played B6, and I figured I would just fianchetto and make something happen with that, and play kind of positionally for a while. So E4. So here begins the methodical execution of tempi for white. Although this opening doesn't rely heavily on timing necessarily, every move counts when you play chess. So I just went Bishop E7, Bishop D3, and another tempo bites the dust. So I played Rook E8, and I'm going to try to get E5 in without dropping a pawn, which would be nice. Again, I could probably play E5 right away. After D takes E5, pawn takes, knight E5, knight E5, Bishop E5, Queen E7, maybe Bishop takes F6, Bishop takes C3, Rook A8, Queen E2, maybe Queen D6, and I have a lot of pressure down the center for the missing pawn, and that's kind of the benefit of winning all these tempos in the opening is you can like sack a pawn and have a tremendous amount of pressure. So anyway, I just played Rook E8 so I can get in E5 without having to lose a tempo, or without having to lose a pawn. So bishop e3 and another tempo's gone. I guess she realized she couldn't stop e5, so she was saving herself a tempo there. C5. I probably should just play e5, continue with e5, but c5 also strikes at the center, which is good. I mean, the one downside to playing e5 right away is that now my bishop is kind of stuck behind the e5 pawn. So I guess I wanted to keep things a little more flexible. So c5, c3, rook c8. Maybe I should just take c takes d4, and then e5 anyway, something like that. Rook c8. The whole point is she hasn't castled yet, so I want to break open the center quickly and try to prevent her from castling. But now it's just too late. cd4, knight d4, knight c5. So when I played knight c5, I thought I was just winning the e4 pawn because I have a lot of pieces hitting it. But after bishop b5, I guess I just hallucinated. I don't know. So I just have to move my rook back to f8. I could try playing e5, which is kind of an interesting sacrifice. After bishop e5, queen e5, knight 4 to e3, and then I take the e4 pawn. And now I have a really strong center, and I have really strong bishops. So it's questionable whether or not it's a sound sacrifice or not, but I think black is doing okay here. So, but I just played rook f8, trying to keep things simple for now. f3, good move defending e4, but a little bit weakening for her king. So now I played a6, and I didn't want my light squares to be a launching pad for tactics, so I tried to defend them a little better. Because my light squares like b5 and c6 are both weak if I don't play a6, so I figured if I play a6, the bishop's going to retreat, and my b7 bishop will cover c6, so everything's kind of hunky-dory. So bishop e2. So in hindsight here, queen c7 is a really natural move now that the b5 square is no longer weak, and it's a much more natural move. But I played queen d7. I guess on c7 it's not super clear where it's going, but on d7 it's on these light squares, which may be a little better. I'm not sure. But queen c7 is definitely more natural. So after knight c4, I guess having the queen on c7 would guard this weak b6 pawn. So, so basically here I should just resign and lose my tempo. Not resign the game, but resign that I've lost a tempo and play queen c7. But if I did that, I wouldn't have as strong an argument about Anthea wasting tempos in the opening. So, so I just played knight to a4, defending the pawn, and if she plays b3, then I just have c3 to capture. So she plays queen d2, covering the squares, and now I played d5. So, well, I mean, after queen d2, let me just say that after the game, Anthea and I got into a bit of a debate about her opening choices. I said she wasted too many tempi, and she said it didn't really matter, and that she liked her position. And although her position is a little picturesque, black has a very strong advantage here, since white's hand has been played in that, you know, she's hitting b6, and she's going to be playing b3 next move. But now it's black's turn to take over the initiative, so I played d5. And always in these hedgehog Sicilian type position, black tries to get in d5. And it is surprising that I actually played it at the correct time, because most of the time when I'm playing these kind of positions, the computer always tells me d5, d5, d5. But I always do it like 5 tempos too late or something. But I actually played it at the right time rather than waiting. So ed5, bishop takes d5. Maybe knight takes d5 is slightly better, because now if she, say, tries to trade off my dark square bishops, that would be a horrible mistake, because after bishop takes h6, queen takes, I have knight takes b2. And after knight b2, knight takes c3. And all of white's pieces are kind of in limbo. Well, let me just... So all of these pieces are basically undefended as e5. E5 undermines the defense of the e2 bishop. The knight on d4 is just hanging currently. Yeah, so I mean this position looks absolutely dire for white. So, but instead I just played bishop takes d5, winning a tempo on the c4 knight. Now she plays knight e5, attacking my queen. There isn't really any better squares. I suppose she could play b3, but then after bishop c4, and I can take on c3, because then I have b5 winning the piece back. So knight e5, queen c7. So I was torn between playing queen d6 and queen c7. I thought with queen c7 I could play rook d8 and make something happen with e5. So that was my rationale behind playing queen c7. But d6 doesn't really change that fact necessarily. So queen c7, and now she plays bishop f4. So she's lining up on my queen. So during and immediately after the game, I thought this move was a mistake. And I thought for 12 minutes, and I didn't come up with the best solution. For some reason, I put a lot of effort into this game in particular, and I think I just wanted to flex my tactical muscles and outshine Anthea at every turn. But here I spent way too much time, and I didn't come up with the best move. I came up with second best, apparently. I played knight h5. And Brian told me that our game inspired him, well, not our game, but Brian told me that this game, in particular, inspired him to play both of his knights to the edge of the board. As you can see, both my knights are on the edge of the board against Zach Beckedahl, who's a strong expert from Fort Collins area. Yeah, so Anthea played the best move, knight g6, attacking my queen, and also defending the bishop at the same time. And now, my whole analysis was to play e5 here, and making it extremely complicated. But it's actually a really terrible tactical mistake. I should just play knight takes f4, and, just say that I lost a pawn, but I played e5, and Anthea could just play bishop takes e5, bishop takes, knight takes, and after queen takes, f4 is attacking my queen and hitting the knight at the same time, and there's nowhere for my queen to go to defend the knight. So that would just win a piece, but thankfully, looking 5 forced half moves ahead is too bothersome for Anthea, so I was able to skip out on that. And instead, she went for knight takes f8, which is what I assumed she would have to play. So I just played knight takes f4, and now Anthea surprised me here. She played the best move. I was expecting knight takes h7 kamikaze, and I didn't think she had it in herself to leave 2 whole pieces hanging for 2 whole moves. So she played bishop takes a6, which is it totally kind of shocked me. I didn't even analyze it at all, but it's basically hitting my rook, so I don't have too much choice here. This is what I was expecting. I was just going to take the knight on d4, and I thought the knight was going to escape, and I would have to do some kind of trickery to keep my attack going. You didn't see that, but I did air quotes for attack. But so bishop takes a6. Kind of forces my hand. I just played rook takes f8. And now she played knight f5. Maybe she could keep with the defense and play knight e2, try to trade off my strong knight f4. But knight f5 isn't too bad. Knight f5, bishop f6. I could just ignore it and just bring my rook to d8 or even a8 and attack her bishop. But bishop f6. I really wanted to preserve my bishop pair, so in case it went into an ending where I'm down. What am I don't even know what the material's like. So she has a rook and 2 pawns versus 2 pieces, so having the bishop pair would be really good for me in the ending. So I wanted to keep those on. Knight h6 check, king h8, knight g4. So now her knight on g4 is a really strong defensive piece, and it's going to be hard for me to dislodge it. But after bishop g5, I have a dual threat of knight takes h3 check and f5, kicking the knight back. So queen c2. So here I spent a lot of time considering multiple alternatives. b5 here is really interesting because now this bishop is trapped, and I'm threatening to just check and win the bishop. So that's a pretty strong move. And I was kind of considering it for several moves even after this, where the white bishop is trapped due to that b6 fork, queen b6 fork. However, it just never quite worked. So for example, bishop takes b5, queen b6, king h1, and queen b5, b3, and then c4 is going to win back the piece. So so I played knight c5, which it's a pretty strong move, just forcing the bishop to retreat, gaining a tempo, getting my knight off the edge of the board. She plays bishop b5, and now I played f5, kicking the knight back. There isn't anywhere else really for the knight to go. Maybe e3 is slightly better. Well, then knight takes h3 check, pawn takes, bishop takes, knight check. So knight f2 is pretty much the only square. So now, again, I spent a lot of time trying to make various sacrifices work. None of them really lead to anywhere, though. But they have merit if white defends them properly, but I wanted to show people that I can sacrifice soundly and I don't have to just give away my pieces unsoundly. So what I was looking at was knight takes g2, for example, and after king g2, e4, and rook g1 holds for white, so I wasn't too confident about that position. There's other holding lines as well, so like queen d1. I'm still better here, but it throws away a lot of my advantage. Another idea is bishop takes f3, but after g takes f3, e4, fe4, knight h5, king h1, queen g3, rook g1, queen f3 check, rook g2, knight g3, king g1, and my position is not really shaping up. Bishop e3, just putting in more and more pressure. But after rook e1, there's no follow-up. It looks really menacing, but there is no powerful follow-up here. And with best play, it amounts to nothing more than a positional draw type thing. Although I can still keep going after her. So if we go back after knight f2, I finally settled on playing queen g7. There are better moves for sure, but queen g7 is the strongest looking move, because now I have pressure building up on g2, and also I have threats of bishop takes f3, and it's just like a whole slew of messes that she has to deal with. So now she plays knight d1, and now that my queen is on a more active post, all the sacrifices start working. and none more potent than the move that I played. Knight takes h3 check. And there's a ton of variations here. I just want to go through them really quickly. So g takes is going to be terrible after bishop e3 double check, king h2, bishop f4 check, king h1, and now rook g8, queen f2. My threat, if you couldn't see it, was bishop takes f3 check, and then followed by rook g1 mate. Queen f2, and now knight e4 is a really strong sacrifice. If she takes the knight, then bishop e4 check, queen f3, bishop f3, rook f3, queen g2 is mate. So if she plays queen c2, then queen g3 is going to be a checkmate there. So if instead after bishop e3 if she tries king h1, then bishop takes f3 check. Yeah, I already showed this. Bishop f4 is mate, or rook f3, queen g1 is mate. So knight h3 is a really strong sacrifice, so she decided she didn't want to take it, so she played king h1. I was hoping that she would accept it so I could play one of those beautiful looking lines. Now my original intent here was to play bishop f4 right away, but I wasn't too sure that it would work out entirely, so I wanted to just maintain my material. So I played knight to f4. So she played g3, and now I missed a really powerful rook lift here with rook f6. After something like rook f2, I don't think she can take f4 because bishop takes f4 is going to lead to a pretty quick checkmate along those lines. So rook h6 check, king g1, bishop h4. This pawn is pinned. Rook g2. My arrows aren't working. Bishop g3. Knight e3, bishop f3, and now all of my pieces are swarming in. Only the dunce knight on c5 is being lazy, and she's in a lot of problems. She has a ton of problems here. So I missed that, and instead I played knight. Why aren't the arrows working? Oops, sorry about that. That is so weird. Okay, g3. Anyway, g3. So I played knight h5, which is also a really strong move because now this g3 pawn's under attack. And this is what the initiative is. It's all about making a threat that she needs to respond to, and getting your pieces to better squares once they move. So she played queen h2. There isn't really any better defensive moves. So now I played knight e4, which is a really fun sacrifice. So why defend the knight on h5 when I can, advance with the sacrifice? And finally, my dunce knight on c5 is making himself useful. So after f takes e4, I played bishop takes e4, king g1, and now I played knight takes g3, and I felt like a kid in a candy shop. I'm sacking all my pieces, and it's just demolishing all of her defenses around her king. And after king f2, she can't. There's no way that she could take this, because after bishop e3 double check, king h2, queen h6 check, queen h3, bishop f4, rook f4, queen f4. Queen g3, it's getting really bad. So, then what? Queen h6, queen g1, f4, and this is sliding over. My queen's coming down here. It just looks horrible. So knight g3. So she played king f2, and I played a simple move here. I played bishop to f4, It's simple, but it's also really complicated. But I could just play knight takes rook and be winning pretty strongly also. I think I'm only up a pawn, but her king's super exposed, and her rook on a1 is still undeveloped. But bishop f4 is kind of nice because it's got additional threats to it, mainly knight h1 check, winning the queen. So she plays queen a4 to get out of it. And now, finally, I played Fritz best in one of these really tactical positions. I played knight h1 check. And remarkably, it's actually a full rook stronger to put a knight in a corner than it is to take a rook off the board. If I just take on f1, it's not nearly as strong. So, knight h1 check, king e2. Actually, I guess the computer's changing its mind about the knight takes f1. See, now it says that knight takes f1 is better. I don't understand this finicky computer. Anyway, knight h1 is pretty cool because it it finally gets my queen into the game, which is, or at least it gets my queen down here, which is the most important thing. So knight h1 check, king e2, queen g2 check, and now she has to give up a ton of material, or she's getting checkmated. So knight f2 is just a forced mate, but after rook f2, I just take. Bishop f3 check because the queen was pinned. e4, king c4, queen g8, king b4, bishop d6, and this is going to be a checkmate for sure. Yeah, that's checkmate. So she blocked with knight f2, but now queen f3, king e1, queen e3, and I'm going to be delivering mate on d2. So this game was pretty intense. I felt like I played it pretty well tactically. I made many mistakes, however. But when you get in these really sacrificial type games, it's hard not to make a mistake. Because it's all about number crunching, and humans aren't the best number crunchers in the world. So that was one of my better attacking games from 2012. Let me know what you guys think, and I'll catch you guys next time.